Millionaire's shocking joke on a black maid backfires as she transforms into an incredible vision. Abigail's hands moved with the rhythm of desperation, scrubbing away the remnants of a long day at Charles's mansion. The glimmer of polished floors reflected her unyielding spirit, a spirit tested daily by her patron's casual condescension. Today, however, something about Charles's demeanor cracked the fragile veneer of her patience. "Don't get lost in your own artwork, Abigail," he had chuckled during lunch, oblivious to her silent tension. The implication hung in the air, a stark reminder of her place in this world. She breathed in, counting the seconds to calm her racing pulse. How could someone with such affluence remain so blind? Dinners served on golden platters and fountains in every corner. To him, she was merely a piece in his well-curated gallery of wealth. Yet her heart beat for more. She shifted her thoughts to her daughter, whose college dreams were painted in vibrant hues of hope. Was this the life she wanted for her? The pills of fear and self-doubt churned within her, battling against her dreams, leaving her feeling suffocated. As evening descended, a fit of laughter broke her momentary silence, as if Charles's voice echoed through an empty chamber, mocking her aspirations yet again. "What are you going to do, Abigail? Paint the walls?" An explosive flare of anger ignited within her chest with every syllable. He had no idea of the profound world she carried on the tips of her fingers, nor the history that thrummed in her veins. The melody of ancestors rose up like a tide, urging her to reclaim her voice. That night, Abigail arrived home with a shadow clinging to her heart. The door creaked as she entered, the dim light of her kitchen barely illuminating the worn table. With her brush in hand, she began to paint furiously, each stroke a revolution against the prejudices that stifled her. A wave of catharsis washed over her as the canvas transformed into a vibrant tapestry of rebellion, breaking chains. This was her lifeboat in a sea of despair, each color reflecting both her anguish and hopes. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. Days rolled into nights, and soon the competition loomed, a beacon of possibility yet wrapped in anxiety. How could she face the judgmental eyes of an audience? Could the world see her not as a maid, but as an artist? With each brushstroke, Abigail faced those doubts, her heart colliding.
On the day of the event, a crowd buzzed around her, but all she could hear was the voice of Charles, with his dismissive laughter haunting her. Sweat pooled at her temples as she gazed at her painting. Breaking chains could redefine her existence. Could it be the key that unlocked the door to a future painted in her own colors? The stakes were high, the pressure suffocating. The spotlight glared, echoing her insecurities. As the final moments approached, the weight of the room pressed against her chest. Thousands of possibilities swirled, yet her identity fluttered uncertainly between the past and future. In that charged silence, Abigail felt the world pivot on the brink of rebirth. Would she seize this moment, or would Charles's laughter echo in her mind forever? Each breath marked a silent war, urging her to leap into the unknown. Abigail stood at the edge of her destiny, heart racing as the timer counted down. The crowd's energy vibrated around her, a cacophony of murmurs and laughter, blending with the buzz of cameras and phones, capturing the spectacle of creativity. She could almost feel the weight of judgment pressing against her like the polished surface of the floors she cleaned each day. In those moments, she found herself standing there, a carrier of dreams far brighter than the opulent chandeliers overhead. Yet doubt clawed at the edges of her mind, a relentless echo of Charles's derision. His laughter, she'd learned, didn't just sting. It rooted itself deep within her, feeding her insecurities like an insistent shadow. "What are you going to do, Abigail? Paint the walls?" The thought made her stomach twist as she tightened her grip on the brush, the weight of her past straining against her possibility-laden present. With every second that ticked by, the vibrancy of her creation seemed to flicker, threatening to dull under the scrutiny of her peers and the looming figure of her employer. They bestowed adulation while she was still caught in a whirlwind of unworthiness. She blinked hard, refocusing on her vision. Breaking chains needed to be more than a painting. It needed to be a declaration. She dredged deep into herself and pulled forth the stories of survival and strength woven into the fabric of her heritage. In those vivid memories, Abigail found not just strength, but a well of potential. The faces of her ancestors stared back at her, urging her to break free from the shackles of perception. Could she truly embody the artist she was destined to be? Suddenly, the timer buzzed, jolting her from introspection. The announcer's voice boomed, breaking through her reverie, calling her name. The crowd turned, eyes fixed on her. In an instant, the room's energy shifted, twisting around her like a whirlwind, demands for her art colliding with her realization of self-worth. The choice was stark: retreat into the shadows or step into the light. With her heart pounding, Abigail moved to the center of the room, isolating her
complete surroundings, becoming the focal point of disbelief and expectation. Her breath steadied as she faced the crowd, the multicolored waves of her painting radiating behind her, alive with emotion. Each stroke reflected the pain of rejection, the perseverance through hardships, and an unyielding desire for expression. Her voice, a blend of passion and trembling uncertainty, finally broke through. This painting represents what lies beneath the surface. A struggle, yes, but also an awakening. It is an invitation for all of you to see beyond what you expect and believe in the power of transformation. Her words flowed like the colors on the canvas, relentless in their urgency, demanding attention and respect. Yet as they hung before the audience, reactions bloomed like petals unfurling. Some looked surprised, others skeptical. Questions lurked in their eyes, and as a ripple of murmurs rose, she felt the tension thicken the air. Suddenly, a hand shot up from the back. Charles's sharp, mocking tone sliced through the atmosphere. "So, you think this is art? How quaint," he quipped, laughter trailing behind him like a toxic cloud. Abigail's pulse quickened, each thud loud enough to drown out his laughter. She knew this confrontation would be her defining moment. What lay ahead meant exposing herself to more than just his judgment. It meant confronting her own fears. Taking a deep breath, she leaned into the unease, consciously reminding herself of that fiery determination she'd unleashed on the canvas. In that instant, she was not just an artist. She was a warrior ready to reclaim her narrative. With renewed strength, Abigail squared her shoulders to face the judgment head-on. If you want to define art, then let's talk about what it truly means. The challenge hung in the muted silence, a new canvas set for their creative duel. The moment had arrived. Now they would see who would truly break chains. Abigail's heart raced, her words still hanging precariously in the charged air. Silence enveloped the crowd, the heavy weight of anticipation palpable. She felt exposed, the scrutiny of their gazes unnerving her more than the laughter that had erupted moments ago. This was where she would either make her stand or falter, and she refused to retreat into the shadows. Charles leaned against the back wall, a smirk plastered on his face, arrogance radiating from him. He was the embodiment of privilege, someone who had never faced the struggle she so intimately understood. It filled Abigail with a sudden clarity. This was not just her fight. It was for every voice diminished by condescension and derision. Art, she continued, her voice steadier, is the purest reflection of the human experience. While you mock what you do not understand, I invite you to consider the stories behind this canvas. She stepped forward, drawing closer to the crowd, searching for souls who might resonate with her narrative. They were no longer a faceless audience. They were individuals, each holding the potential to see her truth. I paint not merely to create images,
but to forge connections, to reveal truths hidden beneath everyday existence. You see colors, but I see lives intertwined, struggles forged into resilience. The words spilled from her, each syllable an assertion of her identity as an artist reshaping her destiny. Charles's expression shifted, surprise mingled with irritation. And yet, here you are, relying on victimhood to garner sympathy, he fired back. But now his mocking tone lacked its earlier potency. Abigail felt a flicker of victory, the impact of her forceful articulation making her stand taller. You call it victimhood, I call it strength. There's power in recognizing pain and transcending it. My art invites others to embrace their narratives, to see their chains and to celebrate their breaking. She scanned the audience, witnessing changes in their expressions, the seeds of realization sprouting. She saw two women nodding near the front, their eyes glistening, perhaps recalling their own battles. A young man in a checked shirt tilted his head, transformed curiosity on his face. There was a symphony of responses unfolding, the potential for her words to resonate far beyond that room, igniting a flicker of hope within her. "Charles," she said, addressing him directly with newfound resolve, "you think you hold power, but true strength lies in the ability to uplift others, to create space for diverse expressions. Don't diminish what you do not understand. Remember, the greatest artists were once ridiculed for their visions." The crowd began to stir, intrigued murmurs replacing the earlier mockery as Abigail maintained her gaze on Charles. This wasn't merely about a painting anymore. It was a declaration of her journey, a beckoning to share in that narrative and understand its depths. Rather than his usual confidence, uncertainty crept into Charles's eyes. The laughter that had once filled the room was dwindling, metamorphosizing into a chorus of support for her statement. Abigail felt the pulse of connection feeding her, kindling the embers of her determination. "Let's redefine what art can be," she dared to say, inspiring herself with the vision of liberation that her painting portrayed. "Let's recognize the value of every voice, especially those you deem insignificant." As the crowd applauded, the sound was more than just a response. It was an acknowledgement of her transformation. She was not merely a maid wielding paint. She was an artist claiming her space. However, lurking just beyond that ephemeral high was another challenge yet to unfold. Would Charles retaliate? And what about the opportunities that might arise from the newfound respect of her peers? As the room buzzed with energy, a conflicting blend of exhilaration and apprehension wrapped tightly around her. Unknown paths lay ahead. Could she navigate those successfully? What internal revelations still awaited her on this evolving journey? Each moment painted a tapestry of uncertainty, and as Abigail stood on the cusp of her own narrative, she realized the real confrontation had only just begun. Abigail stepped away from the crowd, her heart still racing from her confrontation with Charles. The applause had felt
electric, yet its echo now mingled with the weight of her own thoughts. Was she just riding a wave of temporary success, or was this a turning point? The questions gnawed at her, an unsettling reminder that clarity can often slip away just as quickly as it comes. Outside the building, the dusky sky stretched overhead, echoing the turmoil within. She leaned against the cold brick wall, letting the coolness seep through her clothes, grounding her. The sudden shift in perspective was exhilarating, yet terrifying. It felt like standing inches from a precipice, wondering what lay beyond the edge. Despite the crowd's support, Abigail's mind could not shake Charles's words. Had she truly transcended victimhood, or had she merely stumbled upon a new facade with which to mask her insecurities? This was a crucial moment where her internal beliefs would either be solidified or shattered. She closed her eyes, each breath intentionally deeper than the last. Seeking that balance, Abigail began to process her thoughts. The narrative she had woven for others could also become hers. She had a choice: amplify the power of her story or fall back into the silence that had once shrouded her. Slowly, she pulled away from the wall and moved to the nearby park. The fading light painted the trees golden, a reminder of the beauty lingering in fleeting moments. She found a bench and sat, her eyes fixed on a group of children playing nearby. Their laughter, uninhibited and genuine, filled the air and eased her racing thoughts. For the first time that evening, she allowed her guard to lower. Connectedness was her lifeline. How could she foster this in her art? This question pushed her forward, each thought flowering into an idea. Could she start a series depicting struggles and victories, finding resonance in every piece? Each brushstroke could empower not just herself, but the very spirits that whispered their truths to her as she painted. Visions of her next steps flooded her mind. She could focus on finding galleries willing to showcase her work, a stage for her voice, her story, the beauty in her journey, a canvas that told the stories of those who were often rendered invisible. But self-doubt crashed in, threatening to drown her. Was she skilled enough? Did she have the networks? For every attempt at empowerment, there loomed the ghost of rejection. Charles's words echoed again, mocking the threads of her resolution. "No," she murmured aloud, anchoring herself. "I will not let doubt define me." She rose from the bench, emerging with a renewed sense of purpose that enlivened her steps. Her mind, now sharper and clearer, guided her to a nearby coffee shop. It was bustling and filled with the laughter and chatter of people across different backgrounds. Here, Abigail would find artists, writers, allies, individuals just like her striving to make a mark. She could utilize her voice to connect with them, to build a community, not a collective movement, but intimate spaces for sharing art, ideas, and struggles. As she entered the coffee shop, Abigail felt the pulse of life around her and recognized it mirrored her own heartbeat, a rhythm of potential. She could feel opportunity stirring among the crowd. Each person might represent a new chapter, a fresh connection to weave into her narrative. But her reverie was interrupted by the sharp sound of a chair scraping against the floor, coupled with the unmistakable figure of Charles striding through the entrance, his laughter ringing like an ominous bell. The moment had come to face her fears, to confront the voice that held both a challenge and a reflection of her path ahead. Abigail straightened, preparing her defenses, not just against Charles, but against the shadows that loomed in her own mind. Would this encounter further solidify her resolve or fracture it? As she locked eyes with him, anticipation coursed through her, signaling that the next battle had begun. Would she stand her ground or retreat? Would her journey to redefine art and herself propel her forward or force her to reconsider everything? The stakes had never felt higher, and Joseph's approach was a harbinger that would shape the unfolding narrative of her life. Abigail wrestled with the thoughts swirling in her mind, her heart pounding as she stood frozen in place. Charles's presence filled the coffee shop with a tension that felt almost tangible, like the static before a storm. She had resolved to emerge from her cocoon of fear, This confrontation could either be a powerful catalyst for change or an opportunity lost. The chair he dragged to the table clattered, drawing the attention of several patrons. Their glances flicked between them, a subtle acknowledgment of the dynamic at play. Abigail felt exposed, her emotions curling inward and battling between fight or flight. She clenched her fists, reminding herself that this was her moment to confront not just Charles, but the insecurities that had gnawed at her since the beginning. As he settled into his seat, an air of mockery infused his sunny demeanor. "Look who it is, the little artist in pursuit of a big dream," he called out, loud enough to draw the attention of the nearby tables. The laughter that followed felt like needles pricking at Abigail's newfound resolve. In that moment, she understood the power of her choice. Could she reclaim her voice, or would she allow his derision to dictate her actions? Abigail took a deep breath, her mind racing with memories of past encounters, of silences, of second-guessing herself. Her eyes narrowed slightly as she pushed back the sensation of dread, replacing it with purpose. "Funny, coming from someone who relies on hollow compliments to feel important," she responded, her voice steady, a stark contrast to the turmoil inside. Taking a step toward him, she made the first move in their unspoken game. "I've realized that only I have the power to define my narrative, and I refuse to let your words shape my story." Charles's momentary surprise flickered in his demeanor. Eyes and the laughter around them quieted, intrigued now by Abigail's boldness. She felt a rush of adrenaline seep through her veins, illuminating paths of courage she hadn't fully explored. "What a brave little speech," he retorted, though the confidence in his tone wavered. "But let's be real. How many people really care about the struggles of a nobody?" "Someone who matters will," she shot back, the warmth of newfound conviction warming her chest. She was acutely aware of the small crowd's focus, their faces a canvas of curiosity and engagement, urging her to deliver the next stroke of her newfound honesty. Abigail pressed on, captivated by the recognition dawning upon her. Every word spoken could become part of her ongoing transformation. Art doesn't need to be grand. Sometimes it's simply about being seen. I'm not creating for you or for anyone else. I'm creating for me and for those whose voices go unheard. The silence wrapped around her declaration like a warm embrace, and for the first time she felt the empowerment of taking control of her narrative. Each syllable became a scaffold that supported the strength she was building within herself. The laughter from earlier evaporated, replaced by an intense focus. People leaned closer, a collective breath held, as if witnessing a moment of truth. Abigail saw the flicker of irritation on Charles's face transform into something more sinister, a person threatened by the very notion of being unmasked. She realized this tiny coffee shop was a microcosm of the world outside, and her words had the potential to stir change not just within her, but for others like her. With her heart hammering, she turned to the crowd. "I want to open a dialogue about our struggles, to showcase the stories we've been afraid to tell. Who can help turn that vision into reality?" The energy shifted palpably, a wave of intrigue washing over the room, her voice resonating with a kind of purpose that both excited and terrified her. But Charles's laughter rang out again, more cynical this time. "You think just because you had a little applause you've made it? That's cute. Let's see how far those dreams take you." She faced him fully, finally acknowledging that he represented every insecurity she had fought against. The room hung on the precipice of their confrontation, and in it she understood that her vulnerability was an asset, not a weakness. The progression of her artistic journey could no longer be tethered to the past. The stakes were high, yet Abigail felt a new kind of vitality surge within her, igniting her resolve to shape her future. How far they take me will depend on my willingness to embrace this new chapter, she said, her tone resolute. Let's see whose narrative holds the power in the end. Abigail turned away from Charles, a sense of inevitability swelling in her chest. She realized she was not just fighting for herself, she was setting the stage for all those who had felt. The coffee shop buzzed with newfound energy as conversations ignited around her, some offering nods, others expressions of surprise. She had planted seeds, and they were ready to grow, nourished by her audacity. But even as she stepped back, the uncertainty still lingered. Could she sustain momentum, ensure her vision flourished, or would Charles find a way to douse the flame before it ignited into a wildfire? Only time would tell, and as she turned to reach for her notebook, preparing to sketch a new framework for her art, she felt the ground shift beneath her, a reminder that the real journey was just beginning. Abigail's heart raced as she took a seat at the small table, her fingers trembling slightly as they brushed the pages of her notebook. The coffee shop had morphed in ways she could hardly grasp. It felt electric, alive with possibility. She realized the gravity of what she had just done, a bold declaration that shook away years of self-doubt. Yet the echo of Charles's laughter still buzzed in her ears, a reminder that she stood on the brink of both opportunity and scrutiny. She began to write. Each word felt like a stepping stone across a fast-moving river of apprehension. Art does not have to be accepted, it just has to be created, she jotted down, the ink absorbing her thoughts like a sponge. Whatever fears lingered after her confrontation were not going to prevent her from crafting a vision that was not just personal, but universal. It was time for expression to collide with purpose. As she glanced up from her notes, the once casual patrons had transformed into her audience, their hushed discussions now occasional bursts of laughter as the atmosphere shifted into a forum for creativity. Abigail had not just defended herself, she had sparked a conversation. But could she sustain it? "What was that you said about dialogues?" a voice interrupted her thoughts. A young woman with brightly colored hair leaned over, eyes sparkling with curiosity. "I'm all in. Give me a canvas and let's start something." Abigail blanked, surprised by the directness, yet intrigued. She was not just inviting feedback, she was inviting collaboration. "I want to explore the intersection of personal struggles through art. What stories do you want to tell?" The woman, holding a steaming cup of coffee, nodded enthusiastically. "I've been trying to put together a series about identity and expression, but I didn't know where to start. Your approach gives me hope that we don't have to do this alone." Abigail felt the warmth of connection bloom in her chest. There had it been, a shared understanding. They were both willing to push the boundaries of their art and speak truths that often went unheard. "Let's create a space where others can join us too. We can host workshops, showcase work." Her words momentarily halted as she caught sight of Charles across the room, his expression one of disbelief. For a fleeting moment, doubt crept back in. That perhaps she was being naive. Did she have enough momentum to rally others, to sustain this newfound hope? Would anyone genuinely want to participate? But was it even worth considering? Charles's ridicule served a purpose too. It provided clarity. He embodied the critical voice she had long fought against, and every interaction with him now felt like another opportunity to counter his negativity with creativity and connection. As if reading her thoughts, the young woman reached out, placing her hand on Abigail's. "We can make this happen. Let's invite others to share their narratives, craft artwork that resonates, perhaps even use social media to reach wider audiences." Abigail reveled in the thrill of the plan, her mind racing with ideas. Every letter she wrote in the notebook felt like a spell being cast, words full of resilience and art as armor. What if we reached out to the local community, find those artists on the fringes whose voices often go unheard? With each moment that passed, Abigail felt a shift. She was no longer just an artist. She was becoming a curator of narratives, a channel for those who were searching for their own means of expression. Yet, amidst her excitement, she remained cautious. Could she handle the weight of this responsibility? Would her vision hold, or would it crumble under pressure? As other patrons gradually approached, inspired by the two women's discussions, Abigail glimpsed the horizon of her vision beginning to materialize. But the whispered doubts of Charles lingered like shadows. "Remember, not everyone will care," echoed a fragment of his derision. Fingers tightened around her pen, and she let out a slow breath, grounding herself in the present. It was time to transition from self-doubt into the architect of her own story. Just then, a stranger approached their table, a man with a camera slung around his neck, eyes bright with intrigue. "Did I just hear you talking about art and storytelling? I think that's something the local news would love to hear. Have you thought about sharing your initiative through a feature?" Abigail's heart leaped into her throat. A new opportunity had emerged, one that could amplify their voices and expand her reach. Yet again, an invisible weight pressed down. Would she be able to maintain authenticity while facing a public spotlight? Could she withstand the scrutiny that would come after sharing such personal narratives? As she traded glances with the young woman at her side, an unspoken determination flickered between them. They were opening doors, stepping into a realm where creativity could lead the way. But she had a lingering fear. How much of herself could she afford to expose without falling prey to her old insecurities? The time had come to face these new challenges head-on, embracing the real possibility that lay ahead. As the camera clicked, signifying the start of their visibility, Abigail felt the invigorating rush of taking the first bold step into a new direction. But in the back of her mind, Charles' voice loomed large, daring her to falter. Would clarity strengthen her resolve or unravel it? The moment felt precarious, a tightrope walk between ambition and anxiety. Abigail steadied herself. This was not just about her art. It was about defining her place in a world that had almost silenced her. With each new connection and emerging idea, she knew another layer of her journey awaited, brimming with potential yet shrouded in uncertainty. What would happen next as the glare of attention began to shift towards her? Abigail's heart raced with anticipation, ready to leap into the unknown. Abigail's pulse quickened as she considered the man with the camera. He stood poised, ready to capture not just her image, but the essence of the transformation taking place within her. This moment was saturated with both opportunity and trepidation. "Are you ready for this?" the young woman asked, her voice a blend of excitement and concern. Abigail met her gaze, and in that instant a current of resolve flowed between them. Yes, they could do this. Taking a deep breath, Abigail began to articulate her vision to the stranger. She spoke fluidly, her words painting a picture of the workshops they intended to create, the stories they wanted to share. Each sentence emerged, fueled by adrenaline, and the doubts that clung to her like a fog started to lift. For the first time, she felt the weight of her aspirations transforming into tangible plans, a roadmap that others could follow. "You'll want to explore how art connects individual struggles to a larger narrative," he said, nodding as he took notes. "I think people are looking for authenticity." His encouragement ignited a flicker of confidence in her, a spark that whispered she might just have something meaningful to share after all. As the conversation deepened, Abigail realized she was no longer just an artist. She was becoming a leader. Ideas about structuring the workshops unfolded in her mind, each offering insight into her own past, a way to redefine her journey. She'd write a curriculum based on vulnerability, creativity, and community interaction. As she envisioned these sessions, a new level of clarity began to emerge. But greater visibility also invited criticism, an element she could sense creeping back into her mind. What if the work fell flat? What if it didn't resonate? What if she was being deluded by optimism? These questions began to pile up like bricks, constraining her spirit, until she forced herself to reassess. "Your perspective matters," the young woman prompted gently, breaking through Abigail's spiral. "This is carving out space for voices that often go unheard." With those words, Abigail confronted her fears head-on. Wasn't that precisely why she had decided to step into the light? To challenge the silence that had kept her and so many others hidden? Perhaps she was not only becoming a curator, but a vessel of resilience for others to utilize in their journeys. It wasn't just her art anymore. It was about galvanizing a collective strength, inviting others to contribute and collaborate. As the camera clicked, capturing her transformation, Abigail considered that the more she exposed herself, the more threads would weave into a larger narrative. Each stroke she made in her notebook represented not just her story, but the potential for shared connectivity. She could construct a platform that bore the nuances and complexities of human experience. A wave of warmth surged through her as she began gathering contacts on her phone for those who might wish to contribute. She pulled together a list of names from the patrons that had approached her, individuals eager to explore their own narratives. With each name she added, a wave of empowerment washed over her. She was no longer just drafting art concepts, she was igniting a creative movement. "Let's meet again next week to capture our thoughts and experiences," the young woman suggested, a spark of inspiration in her eyes. "This is the beginning, Abigail, and you're at the helm of a new narrative." The words resonated with her deeply. "Together, we can foster an environment where art and dialogue flourish," Abigail replied, a slight smile breaking forth. As they exchanged information, the hum of conversations from the coffee shop morphed into a chorus of solidarity. Each voice blended with her own, melding triumph and heartache into a collective resonance. Yet, as the excitement bubbled within her chest, the specter of Charles, his dismissive laughter echoing in her memory, snuck back into focus. Did he have a point about their efforts being futile? The weight of his skepticism pressed against her newfound enthusiasm. The very thought made her stomach twist. No, Abigail squared her shoulders again, nudging that bothersome doubt aside. This time, she wouldn't concede to defeat so easily. Her initiative was taking root, and the soil needed to be nourished with her faith and dedication. As she left the coffee shop, the sun's rays cast golden hues on her face, igniting her motivation like gasoline on a flame. This was only the start. What would her first workshop feel like? Would the artists she invited bring their stories, raw and unfiltered? The uncertainty lingered like a tightrope waiting for her next move, but deep within, something stirred. She was ready to leap into her new role, confronting the challenge that lay ahead with open arms, prepared to transform her vision into reality. What awaited her on this uncertain but thrilling path, and how would she finally confront Charles's skepticism once again? Abigail awoke the next morning with a head full of ideas and a stronger resolve than ever. The sunlight streamed through her window, illuminating the scattered sketches and notes that littered her desk. They were more than just ideas now. They were the blueprint for something real. She felt a strange thrill as she reviewed them, imagining the faces of the artists she would invite, each bringing unique stories and struggles to the creation of something greater. Yet, in the quiet corners of her determination, the persistent echo of Charles's laughter loomed, not just as a distant whisper, but as a stark reminder of the very hurdles she was determined to clear. Would he see her as someone to be reckoned with, or would he remain dismissive, his past taunts weighing down the potential growth she was trying to cultivate? To drown out those haunting thoughts, she took a step forward.
She meticulously planned her first workshop, mapping out the agenda with an urgency that surprised her. Each element she included was a thread of vulnerability, and each task was designed to encourage others to strip back the protective layers they wore. On the surface, it looked straightforward, yet the emotional undercurrents terrified her. She could almost hear the questions bubbling up from her prospective attendees. Would they really open up? Could they trust her to guide them in this process of sharing? These questions needed answers, but anxiety lingered at the back of her mind. What if they found her unworthy of their stories? What if she faltered when it mattered most? In the next few days, she reached out to everyone on her burgeoning contact list. Those who had expressed interest responded with enthusiasm, invigorating her spirit. However, with each positive response, doubt danced again at the fringes of her mind. The workshop was becoming real, and with that weight, pressure mounted. She felt herself balancing on the edge of excitement and terror. Determined to dispel her fears, she decided to practice her approach. Abigail set up a makeshift scenario in front of her mirror. The reflection staring back was someone she was still getting to know, a woman unearthing layers she thought were long buried. Holding space for others meant holding space for her own vulnerabilities. How could she accomplish that? Keep it simple. Focus on connection, she whispered to herself, attempting to ground her swirling thoughts. Practicing her inviting tone, she imagined the smiles of those who might join her. Abigail felt a spark of pride that she would take an active role in this artistic dialogue. Yet, beneath that pride, gnawing apprehension threatens to resurface. What if they didn't engage? What if they shied away from disclosing their struggles? Her heart raced at the thought. The day before the workshop, anxiety morphed into overwhelming uncertainty. As she stood in her kitchen stirring a pot of soup, she couldn't help but replay the myriad details she had prepared in her head. Flashes of disappointment filled her imagination. Blank faces staring back at her. Critiques whispered behind her back. Her hands trembled as she poured the soup into bowls, setting out dinner with haste. Taking a moment to breathe, she reminded herself of her purpose and why she had embarked on this path. To create an environment of understanding and expression. Your perspective matters, she repeated, clutching the kitchen counter for support. The words that had empowered her moments ago shifted into a mantra, fueling her determination. That night, sleep eluded her as she played out potential scenarios like films. Looping in her mind. As dawn broke, her stomach flipped with anticipation, a bizarre mix of dread and excitement. What if this became more than just a workshop? What if it was the start of a journey not just for her, but for the others who found healing through shared narratives? As she prepared to head out, madness and inspiration swirled within her, waiting for an outlet. With each step toward the studio, Abigail felt the raw, biting fingers of self-doubt tighten around her heart. Then, abruptly, she stopped. In that moment, a revelation washed over her. Embracing vulnerability didn't mean she needed to be perfect. It meant creating authenticity, even if it harvested imperfection. The fear now felt less like a weight and more like the fire that would drive her forward. This time, as she squared her shoulders, her conviction bloomed. Today was more than just a workshop. It was her declaration. With deep breaths, she crossed the threshold. Would her initial approach invite those stories she longed to hear? Or would the dread resurface, threatening to derail her aspirations? Today would reveal the answers, and whatever awaited on the other side, she was finally ready to face it head-on. As Abigail stepped into the studio, a wave of warmth enveloped her. The space radiated creativity. Canvases leaned against walls, vibrant hues splashed across the floor. For a fleeting moment, she allowed herself to indulge in the surrounding energy, but the comfort soon dissipated, replaced by the gnawing tension coiling in her gut. "Focus," she whispered to herself, shuffling her papers at the front of the room. Each organized sheet represented a corner of her thoughts.
yet they felt like an echoing chorus of her fears. She began to set up the space, arranging chairs in a circle as she visualized the faces of her participants. Would they fill the seats with eagerness, or would emptiness haunt her intentions? The uncertainty vibrated through her as she tried to push it aside, but it clung to her like a cold shadow. As the clock ticked relentlessly closer to the start time, she drew on the mental rehearsal she had practiced. A mantra surfaced from her subconscious, a reiterated reminder of her intention. Connection over perfection. With that, the frantic energy diminished slightly. She took a breath, allowing herself to calm in the chaos. Just minutes before participants were scheduled to arrive, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in a nearby window, and anxiety bubbled again. Suddenly, she envisioned Charles sidling in without invitation, smirking as he questioned her capability. "What are you doing here? Who do you think you are?" The laughter echoed within her, amplifying her insecurities, and she felt the weight of doubt pressing down hard. "No," she reprimanded herself, "not today." She straightened her posture, forcing strength into her stance. The workshop was not about him. It was about creating a vibrant space for healing and expression. True dialogue had no room for the cynicism of the past. As the door swung open, her breath caught. One by one, attendees trickled in, some familiar faces mingling with strangers. They were nervous, much like her, with uncertainty flickering in their eyes. Abigail's heart raced. Each person presented a unique canvas upon which they could share their stories. "Welcome," she greeted them, her voice shaking. But then she leaned into her newfound resolve. "I'm so glad you are all here. Today, we explore the beauty of our stories together." She invited them to sit close, introducing herself with a vulnerability she didn't know she possessed. As each name was shared, a thread of connection began weaving. Despite trembling words, Abigail noticed an undercurrent of compassion forming among them. A sense of trust was palpable. The format of the workshop began to unfold naturally. Each exercise revealed layers of untold struggles and dreams. As stories flowed, some raw, others uplifting, Abigail felt an invisible bridge constructing itself among the attendees. They were speaking, revealing their hidden depths, and within that unfolding narrative, Abigail discovered something profound. With each narrative shared, her fear melted away, replaced instead by the realization of her purpose. The initial trepidation transmuted into a powerful energy of hope and camaraderie. The beauty of vulnerability emerged, not only for her participants, but for her as well. "Your perspective matters," she reminded them, echoing the mantra she had clung to in uncertain moments. The anxiety that had once strangled her blossomed into something unexpected: acceptance. Acceptance of her imperfect journey, and the acknowledgement that true connection could only spring from authenticity. Yet, just as she began to revel in this moment of growth, a familiar face stormed through the door. Abigail's breath hitched, and a rush of fear flooded her senses. It was Charles, with that same mocking grin plastered on his face. "Didn't think you'd actually go through with it, did you?" he sneered, and the laughter that had chased her in the shadows returned with a vengeance. Abigail's heart raced. The moment had come to confront her fears head-on. Would she allow his presence to upend all she had accomplished? With newfound clarity, she felt the coiling dread shift into defiance. As she turned to the group, their eyes reflecting a mixture of curiosity and concern, she knew she held the answer. Today, she would not shy away. "Let me show you what it means to face the truth." Would her declaration embolden the others, or would it deepen the chaos? The tension crackled in the air, pregnant with possibilities. Abigail's mind surged with clarity as she faced Charles, whose mere presence threatened to unravel the supportive atmosphere she had nurtured within the workshop. How many moments had she spent silenced by his mockery? Not today.
"Charles," she began, her voice steady, cutting through the lingering doubts that threatened to steal the moment. "You walked in during a pivotal moment of transformation, and I refused to let you derail that." The room fell silent, all eyes on her. Encouragement sparkled in their shared gazes, fueling her resolve. Charles looked taken aback, his expression shifting from arrogance to surprise. That brief flicker gave Abigail the chance to engage the room. "We're discussing art as a means of healing and resilience, a space for every voice. Your presence here confirms everything we are trying to change." The attendees nodded, affirming her words, their collective energy creating a barrier against the judgment he brought. Charles laughed, a hollow sound reverberating through the air. "Healing through art? That's rich, coming from a maid playing at being an artist. You think you can inspire them?" His derision hung like a heavy fog in the small studio, but forged energy among the group instead of stifling it. Abigail felt a wave of support surge through her. There was power in vulnerability, and she resolved to be the embodiment of that strength. "Yes, I do," said Abigail, her confidence punctuating every word. "Each person in this room has a story, an artistic journey marked by struggle. You might see a maid, but I see a community being forged right here, right now." Her heart raced, each statement emboldening her further. "I am here to celebrate our narratives, not to be held captive to your perception of what art should be. It's time we all embrace the transformations waiting at the intersection of our suffering and creativity." The audience stirred, small murmurs of agreement rippling through them. Charles shifted uncomfortably, the force of Abigail's words striking harder than anticipated. "Art is not about our preconceptions, it's about authenticity," she continued, her palms now resting on the table, grounding herself. "Your doubt won't define me or this space. I invite everyone here to rise above, to conjure strength from their stories, no matter how hidden." With each declaration, Abigail became more than a facilitator. She emerged as a symbol of empowerment. The atmosphere crackled with renewed energy. The partakers leaned forward, encouraged to shed their fears. Their faces, previously lined with uncertainty, transformed into expressions of determination. "Let's create," Abigail urged, her voice steady. "Recognize your own narrative. Take courage in your truth. Whether you paint, write, or create through dance, each story here has merit." Abigail turned back to Charles, who was grasping for words, desperately trying to regain his foothold. But the laughter in the room had shifted from skepticism towards encouragement. "You'll find that our strength lies not in your mockery, but in our collective elevation of each other." Charles hesitated, the layers of ridicule cracking around him under the weight of the truth Abigail had unveiled. Slowly, he began to back away, sensing the tide had irrevocably shifted against him. People were no longer his audience. They had become a community. "Let this be a reminder," Abigail said, her voice solid yet calm. "We're dismantling the chains of judgment. Our art is our power, and no one will snuff out our flame." With that, she turned, inviting the participants to dive into their creative exercises, a symphony of brushes, pens, and movement igniting all around them. Her heart swelled with the realization that this workshop was not just an event, it was a resurrection of her spirit and those of every soul in the room. They ventured into the creative flow together, breathing life into colors, rhythms, and words, and soon the space echoed with laughter and collaboration. An undeniable sense of belonging pulsed through them, banishing the fear that had once shadowed Abigail's heart. At the close of the workshop, as they showcased their work, Abigail felt a moment of reflective serenity wash over her. Each piece radiated stories that held the promise of shared experiences. Encouragement filled the air, a testament to her spirit that had refused to back down.
Looking at the faces surrounding her, she marveled at the profound connection forged between every attendee. She had transformed from a maid confined by expectations into an artist leaving an indelible mark. And as the participants rallied to express their admiration, Abigail stood proud, a palpable sense of solid confidence flowing through her veins. She realized she was now not only establishing herself as an artist, but validating the inherent worth in her journey. A journey that had begun in the shadows, but had risen into a tapestry of resilience and connection. The next chapter of her life awaited beyond the walls of that studio. Galleries, exhibitions, more workshops to come. She felt ready to harness each opportunity, equipped with the knowledge that growth stems from vulnerability, and the dreams she once harbored were now in her grasp. Abigail's gaze shifted beyond the studio's bustling energy, embracing the vast horizon of possibility that lay ahead. She had conquered her fears, banished the laughter of mockery, and claimed her rightful place in the world. An artist, a storyteller, and ultimately herself. And as she basked in this newfound clarity, she knew even more importantly, character is built not in silence, but through transformation. Now you need to subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and show your support. Comment your reactions and theories about this powerful ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.